9 months later, I was in New Orleans at the station that offered the other job. And oddly enough, WIXO took over the 98.5 frequency in New Orleans, and it had been the John Larroquette frequency, WWOM.
There's the voice of JD the DJ, who's currently evenings on TIX 94.3 in New Orleans, WTIX. Now, your first paid gig was 1540 WPTI in Albany, where you went by Jeff Douglas. In addition to weekends on air, tell us about what other jobs you were tasked with at the station, because oftentimes smaller markets, the DJ was not just on the air, but he had other tasks as well.
Well, actually, I started doing weekends out there while I was still in college, and I did Saturday and Sunday night from 6 to midnight. And then after college, the all-night shift opened up. They wanted to get rid of I don't know that they wanted to get rid of him, but they essentially they did. And since they had me available to take over, and basically I did 6 hours on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and that was it. Really had no production chores or anything like that. That really didn't happen until I got to WIXO in New Orleans.
Wow!
And of course, I had made a stop at KIRL station in suburban St. Louis and St. Charles, Missouri. That was going after the KXOK audience, and I did mornings there. And then I was fired by Dave Scott of Scott Studios. He was the program director, and in the small world category, he worked at WPTR before I did, and he left to go out. I don't know if he went straight out to KIRL or whether there was a stop in between, but I don't have any ill will with Dave. I liked him a whole lot, actually. We had the KIRL had a proclivity for firing the entire staff every so often. And that happens quite a bit in radio, as you probably know.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time I took the job at KIRL, I actually had another offer from WIXO down in New Orleans. They hadn't gone on the air yet, but I could have gone either way and ended up going to St. Louis. And then, another 9 months later, I was in New Orleans at the station that offered me the other job. And oddly enough, of course, WIXO took over the 98.5 frequency in New Orleans, and it had been the John Larroquette frequency, WWOM. While all that was going on, I had some off time between KIRL and WIXO, and Elliot Graham, I talked about from National Teleconsultants, he got me to come out. He had just put a easy listening station on the air as a consultant, engineering consultant in the Albany area. It was, oddly enough, the call letters were WWOM.
Oh.
So I worked at WWOM in Albany, and then ended up at the station that had been WWOM in New Orleans.
That's cool.
So what are the chances of that happening?
What was the format for WWOM in New Orleans? Was that also easy listening?
No, that was progressive rock. That was, as I think John Larroquette was quoting, he took the name Judas because it was a Catholic city, it was progressive rock, and it was a good name to have in the town. Because he said the most profane thing his dad could ever say was Judas Priest. So that's why he took the name.
Makes sense. Kind of like the station KMET back in the day, the Mighty Met here in Southern California. That was the progressive rock station that people loved, and really, back in the 70s, 80s, they had the moral majority. So KMET called themselves the immoral minority.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of revolution in radio, right?
Yeah. Now, WIXO, that was top 40, correct?
Right. Well, it was supposed to be a cross between the top 40 that was on WTIX-AM and the album rock that was on WRNO at the time, and thus the call letters WIXO. But it was essentially top 40. There wasn't a whole lot of album orientation to it, but it was on FM, and it was good to listen to.
Yeah. Now, how much creativity did you have as far as being able to break new music? If you said to your program director, "Hey, can we try this record out?" How much openness did they have to that?
Well, I really didn't do any of that. I mean, I pretty much stuck to the format. The station had a music director. It was the morning guy. Mm-hmm. And other than, snide comments one way or the other, when we jump on a new record, I stayed out of that world. And unfortunately, I had a friend of mine who was a jock at IXO, who was there when I forget which Chicago album it was that came out, but of course, this was 1973 at the peak of the streaking craze. Mm-hmm. So the record guy for Columbia hired a streaker to come in on Tom Owen's afternoon drive show and bring in the new Chicago album. I got to see that and see Tom's jaw hit the floor when this gal showed up with a new Chicago album.
Is that what inspired Ray Stevens hit the streak about a year or two later?
Well, it was we were actually playing the streak, I think, at the time, so it was all contemporaneous at the time. So, but you don't see moves like that much.
No.
And Tom is another good guy that I met in radio. In fact, he was the best man at my second wedding, and maybe if I'd had him at my first wedding, the first marriage would have lasted more than 7 months. But the second one has gone 46 years, so I guess we did something right.
Oh, there you go. Were you the best man at his wedding too?
No, but I did show up and do the video at his 50th anniversary that he had. He lives in Florida now, and we see each other every now and then. And he's another guy that has roamed around in radio. He worked at WIXO, and then he went to, this was in the, I forget which order it came. I think he went to WRNO-FM when Abrams was kind of debuting the Superstars format. They did it at WRNO, and Tom worked at RNO at that point. And then I guess he kind of made inroads with Lee Abrams and ended up going up to program Rock 103 in Memphis, and then down to KTXQ in Dallas. And there were a couple of New Orleans people there at KTXQ, Bo Roberts and Jim White, who did mornings at that station. Mike Green was the program director at WIXO 3 months after I got there. And I said, uh-oh, the guy that hired me has been fired. That's not good. But Mike was probably the nicest program director I ever worked for. And he ended up, after WIXO was basically sold out from under us, it had been bought by a guy from Chicago, Advanced Communications, and he ended up selling it. It lasted from April Fool's Day of 72 through September, I think it was September 24th of 74, because I played the last song on WIXO before it went dark, and then 5 months later it became WILD-FM, an urban format.
Mm.
And the problem with WIXO was basically signal. It had 54 kilowatts, but it was on the top of an shunt-fed 150-watt religious AM tower down by the river, down by the Mississippi River. Mm. And in fact, at some point, I took over the chief engineering job alongside my disc jockey job at WIXO. And I can remember during one of the flooding periods in the Mississippi River having to put a big long plank from the levee down to the steps of the transmitter building, which was now basically out in the river. Oh. So I had to walk the plank to get to the transmitter, But
too bad you didn't have somebody to film you dressed like a pirate doing that. They could have been.
Yeah, that would have been cool. But my last duties there, basically, we were getting a FCC proof of performance done, which had never been done at the station because they needed that to sell the place.
So just basically signed off. It didn't actually go from one format to the next. It took a couple months to actually come back on the air.
Yeah, it was actually dark for about 5 months. We went off the air in September. I think WILD went on in February the following year. So, but wow. They ended up putting a transmitter in the same building with the WRNO transmitter over on the west bank of the river, and they were full 100 kilowatts, and so the station signal at 98.5 is much improved over the WIXO days. Our basic problem was, there were lots of places that couldn't hear us, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, WRNO, you were there for about 15 years. How soon after WIXO signed off did you go to WRNO?
Well, actually, I went first to WNOE-AM from WIXO. I got hired by Jason O'Brien, who was the program director at the time. This was shortly after Gary Burbank and company had been there.
The Broadbank Burbcasting Company, I think it was, right?
Right.
He was on 700 WLW for many years in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and he was at CKLW, I think, for a while, and he was a trip. I didn't get to interact with him much because I was in doing the all-night show. I was actually working 2 full-time jobs at the time. I was managing a Radio Shack and working at WNOE full-time, which got old pretty quick. And then I guess it was a move of managership at Radio Shack, which, of course, is a job a lot of people make fun of, but I actually took a pay cut to go from being a Radio Shack manager to being a full-fledged engineer at Lockheed Martin. And they actually, this was back when Charles Tandy was still running Radio Shack. They actually paid pretty well, with the bonus and whatnot. So
wow.
Anyway, so I had, in the meantime, I had been working at one radio station or another while working at Radio Shack, and at some point, WRNO needed a weekend guy, which sounded a whole lot better than trying to do 4 hours every night to 5 hours on a weekend night. And so I started working at WRNO at that point. And then essentially after I tried to hang up my headphones in 1991 from WRNO, and it lasted about 4 years before Michael Costello, who was the program director and the brother of the founder of WRNO, Joe Costello, pestered me to come work at WTIX-FM, which he basically just done a move-in on a station that was down in Galliano, down in the swamps of Louisiana, and moved it up a number of miles to cover the New Orleans area pretty well. and they went to 100 kilowatts, and they're doing pretty well signal-wise. And I ended up starting work at WTIX while working at Lockheed Martin as an engineer on the space shuttle program. We build the I say we. I don't do it anymore, but it was the home of the external tank program for the space shuttle.
Wow!
So we had the good contract out of the shuttle program because we had to make a new tank for every launch. So I think we ended up making 138 of them.
Wow, dang.
And I was there from 1981 or so to they closed up the program in 2012, I guess it was, after we delivered that 138th tank. So I worked in the equipment engineering department for the facilities organization, so I got to live through the arrival of the IBM PC, and I basically was responsible for buying all of the computer equipment that went into the place. There was a huge 43-acre factory out in New Orleans East that we call the Rocket Factory, which was the home of the Apollo program. The Saturn boosters are made there by Boeing. And then it followed on into the 1973. They awarded the shuttle contract out there. So I'm probably more an engineer than I am a disc jockey, but...
Out of curiosity, the computer technology they have on the space shuttle, which you worked a lot on, how many years advanced is it for them? For instance, the technology that they have on the shuttle, how many years does it usually take for it to arrive to the general public as far as computer technology and know-how? Because it seems like the technology on the shuttle is a lot more advanced than what we have for the general public.
Well, I don't know that I would say that. I would say it's probably contemporaneous. I mean, the technology that was in the computer on the lunar lander for the Apollo program was your cell phone does a better job than it could do, and the computers that were in the orbiter, which other than the mock-ups that were at the Kennedy Space Center, which obviously I got to see a time or two, but I wouldn't put the reputation of the shuttle computational power much above anything else that you could get at the time, because we were coming out with the Cray supercomputers and the IBM PC and its follow-on clones and lookalikes were probably every bit as good as stuff that ended up in the orbiter.
We're talking with JD the DJ, and next time we'll find out more about his work with NASA, as well as his getting to meet the original Not Ready for Primetime players from NBC's Saturday Night Live, and his interesting interview with a member of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Find out which one of them he talked to.